Hello.
Hey, hello. Wow.
Nice to see everybody.
Mm,
Welcome,
great.
welcome. Hmm.
You're all well. We're well enough.
As always, feel free to take a few moments to check out who's here with us if you'd like.
Mm. Well, to begin, just let your attention settle wherever it naturally lands around your body, surface of your skin, where your sit bones are touching your cushion or bench or chair or your back, the physical sensations where your back touches the floor, bed. So it's like that invitation to land more deeply within and around your body. An invitation, not a command. And notice if the attention can receive the physical sensations that are happening moment by moment. Warmth, coolness, tingling, pressure, heaviness. Just whatever sensations come, and letting them also wordlessly emerge. And as we settle in, sometimes it's helpful to call up or have an intention for connecting with kindness. So, really, whatever word is helpful, it could be caring, compassion, it could be tenderness, kindness. But it's really this deep intention during the sit to at times relate to what's happening. Or there could be a quiet tenderness, like holding a baby bird in the palm of your hand. Our moment to moment experience requires this kind of soft readiness for anything to happen. So just check to see if some aspect of our body, mind, heart can receive the kindness, care, tenderness. Letting it seep into our cells, bone. If you can, at time. And as we shift to awareness of hearing, notice how tender it really is to receive sounds just as they're happening, not through the thought process. Receiving the textures and vibrations just as they are, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Including silence as a sound, texture and vibration of silent. And we can learn a deeper and deeper ease of well-being as we allow, make space for the sounds to just come and go, just as they are, without having to do anything with them but notice them. It's just hearing happening, just as it is. And the knowing of the hearing. And shifting to our hands, we can notice a thought about the hands which is the visual image or memory. Just right there, we can see there's no need to fix or control or think it shouldn't happen. The visual memory appears of hand, and then we practice. Can we be with the physical sensations just as they're happening, moment to moment, at times without the image. It's a practice. And it's you just see what happens when you connect your attention there. Always new. Never the same moment. So we shift from being identified with the idea, my hand, memory, to having a moment to moment relationship with the truth of how things are. Aliveness, physical sensations, always changing moment by moment. And then sometimes just shifting into the movement of the breath at our abdomen area. Sometimes we come to stillness through our awareness of this movement we call breath. And sometimes the attention can be right with that beginning of the rising. And sometimes we space out, no problem. Sometimes we can just be with that whole rising movement, beginning of the falling movement, disappears. And wherever the attention spaces out, it just can come back. Maybe at the end of the rising, it doesn't matter. Sometimes the attention needs to open up to a wide angle. And sometimes it can be right there with the microscopic. It doesn't matter. It's all just skillful means. and exploring how things are without pressure, just with the motivation to understand the truth of the nature of how things are. At times, just applying this way of practice to thoughts coming and going, emotions coming and going, physical sensations and sounds, smells, tastes. With at times care, kindness, or tenderness.
Thank you, Michelle. So we have some time this afternoon to take any questions that folks may have about your practice, about the instructions, uh, spiritual life, things that we might be able to support with in any way. Uh, the best way to let us know if you have a question is to at the bottom of your little Zoom screen. There's a button that says a raise hand. You can click on that, or you can type into the chat to me that you have a question, or flail your arms around. We'll see that as well. So yeah, just look forward to checking in with folks and seeing if there's any way we can be of support. Pretty quiet, Michelle, huh? Oh, you're muted there.
Fully enlightened, I think.
That's cool. The
There's
heat domes in our minds. Julie, yay, yes. Hold on. I realize I need to change a quick setting here. Oh, forget it. I'll just ask you to. Let's see. Can you unmute there, Julie?
Okay.
Great.
All right. I don't know where to start. I guess I guess I'm looking for some, I don't know, feedback or perspective on how to deal with one's system when you're hyper aroused about everything. That's what's happening with me right now. Everything impacts me, and I am just like flailing my hands, like you say, Jesse. Figuratively. But I know it's got a lot to do with being overtired and also pushing myself too much. But like since the retreat, I think I've become more aware of my thoughts, of my actions, my body, the tension in my body. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's like I go from being quietly aware of it, and then all of a sudden I'm reactive again, like my whole system's reacting against something again. And yeah, I know everything you've said already is some are things that I'm already working with, but just a little more. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I can start, Michelle, if you or we can kind of go back and forth a little. Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, I mean, Julie, it's also, it sounds like from a few like kind of past check-ins, right, that there has been this sense of kind of like invigoration, in your practice and things kind of really coming together in a powerful way. And then I think part of what it sounds to me that you're like pointing to is there are times in our practice where it's there's this sort of just heightened kind of sensitivity and heightened voltage, and it feels a little bit like you kind of can't turn it off. You can't. Um, it's not that it's all bad, but that it's all the sort of sensitivity and the sometimes the kind of ease with it, but then other times the reactivity with it just feels um, more persistent, more alive, and and that it's funny that sometimes like there's this desire to kind of be able to go turn it off, right? Like turn off the mindfulness and turn off the sensitivity and kind of go back to sometimes it feels like a more of like a kind of dullness of uh, that that we see the reason sometimes for the protection of that dullness of mind at times, right? That we've had,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
then kind of when it's gone, there's like there's just a vulnerability there and a sense of kind of exposure to so much, whether it's like what's happened in your body or the news or interactions with someone or just whatever. Um, so I think in a way, I'll say maybe part of like the other side that can kind of happen is like this, these periods of sensitivity also can dissipate. And then there'll be sometimes after that where we'll feel kind of dull again and we'll wish we'd have taken more advantage of the time that you're more sensitive, right? But because it's not familiar, because it feels kind of overwhelming, there's a resistance to it. There's a kind of wanting, it to settle down or quiet down or, um, yeah, turn off. So it's all really just to say that sometimes it's just the unfamiliarity that can feel uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
um, that to not always necessarily like buy into that too much, right? That it's also kind of a gift to have a period of time where you are more sensitive, right, to more and more sort of subtle phenomena, whether that's internal or external, and to just note, overwhelm, doubt, resistance, frustration, wanting in terms of just like maybe wanting, something more sort of um, I keep coming back to that word kind of dull, to happen. And on the other hand, sort of go with it, right? Like to take advantage of this, the fact that what you're seeing is true, right? That's the most important part. That like what you're describing and experiencing is like it's just real, right? It's not, it's real phenomena in the body, material experience, right? It's real phenomena and engagement with other people or other phenomena or whatever it might be, that feels more sort of external. These are not sort of like fabrications that are overwhelming you. It's just like the reality, right? And it's a degree of reality that might be less familiar and less comfortable with, and with a kind of persistence and relentlessness that's uh, like tiring, you know. But that there's another part of you that that you can look for or sort of see. Is there another part of like that's like invigorated by it or excited by it or the sense of like, wow, this is an opportunity to actually see this aspect, this level of reality that you're in right now, which will not probably always be available. There'll be other things that kind of come and go. But that would be my sort of primary and kind of maybe initial sort of offering, is just this sense of it's hard, right? It is hard to be that sensitive. And you see why we turn it off and we dull it down and we numb out to it. And, those why the mind, why we have those patterns, because it's the kind of relentlessness of it can feel overwhelming. And that this, of course, it's like happening in the context of your growth and your capacity to be with more and more, and that you're saying that you're still experiencing times of quiet and tranquility within that, right? And that other times it's more sort of reactive and whatever, grouchy, or whatever other sort of ways we might kind of respond. um, to get that's there's a dynamic there that's also part of what happens, right? That you find you have the space and time and practice, and to get kind of quiet with it, and then those conditions fall away, and then it's overwhelming, and the system is going to go back to its other patterns. But that's sort of part of the ride, is that kind of up and downness of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah,
don't, does that resonate? Does that feel?
yeah, it does. It totally, yeah, it explains it a lot. But it's the effects on me that I am trying to deal with in a caring way, I think. Like I'm trying to bring in the Brahma Viharas quite a bit with it, because it drives me crazy. Like it makes me feel attacked. It makes me feel I get so burnt out. um and exhausted, and then sometimes I get reactive and angry. Like some days I am at the limit, and then all of a sudden I'm finding I'm like chewing out the teller, or something, or just reacting in silly over the top ways. And I'm really trying to be compassionate with myself about that, and change it. But yeah.
I'm curious about when you say you feel attacked.
Mm-hmm.
What is your experience of that?
It feels like my system is being it's too much for my system. Like my system feels like barraged, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and I think whatever Jesse just kind of covered it. So, but I'm going to just maybe come at a different, like a little different angle. I mean, for everyone, part of the spiritual growth is um, one of the metaphors is like the heart center and the mind, the chitta, the mind is like opening, right? It's an opening process, and in that process, um, there's so much voltage in the universe.
Yeah.
The what we might call the little me has to learn how to contain and ground that much voltage. So when you hit that reactiveness and the intent, the overwhelm, it's that the system can no longer contain that much voltage. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
happens for all of us. That it happens for all of us. But how we learn how to ground it, or like try to change the channel enough to as Jesse says, ride it. Like it's riding it's like getting adept at riding the surges and then the tiredness. And the ride includes the exhaustion, the tiredness, the high voltage. It's all part of the ride.
Right. And so you're saying to try to, it's like an acceptance that that's part of the ride or something.
A big part of it, because if we're fighting it, it makes the voltage go up or the exhaustion it's like if you look at my hand for a second, it's like the ups and downs, it often are very steep. And over time, it starts like you see it's smoothing out. You're not as down as you're not as high. It smooths out because one isn't fighting it or holding on to what do we like. And but it is intense. It's like when that voltage is high, um, it can feel either very like we like it up to a certain point and get attached to it, or we start not liking it, right? Like
Mm.
there's pleasant and unpleasant aspects of the voltage.
Yeah. Sometimes I get so excited and so thrilled about certain things that and then I go, oh, there I go again, like going way too fast. And then I try to rein it in, but that's maybe not what you're talking about.
This, the classical way the seven factors of awakening are described, and you looked at like mindfulness as the warp of the weaving of awakening, and then the first three after that are investigation, courage, courageous energy, and joyful interest or rapture. Those are very energizing. They're
Yeah.
meant to be energizing. And then, particularly with the rapture one, the joyful interest, that takes a long time to learn how to have any balance with it. And so the next three are fascinating because the next three are, I love it because, of course, I'm I'm very, my system is very open anyway. So like that voltage, when I think of the word calm, it's like I always laugh. Oh yeah. It's always like for me, it's like, oh yeah, calm, like calm, right? Calm. So you say, and even if you can joke about it when that voltage is happening, that's how the Buddha taught how to balance.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah. I had a moment like that today where I was writing and writing and writing. And then I got up, and then I went to do something, and the book, the writing page just went flap on the ground, and everything was strewn all over. And I just started laughing. I was like, it's kind of like,
because that was very grounding and it literally was grounding. You had to pick it up, right? Stop and pick it up. But that calm, really, it's just like if there's sound of the refrigerator on, it's like when that sound goes off. We all know what that feels like is like when the calm comes.
right. Mhm.
It's like the energy gets more into balance. And then, of course, the next one is concentration. So if one can, find a little calm and then sometimes it's literally a matter of holding on to a tree or holding on to something heavy or like feeling the heaviness of your bed or when you're walking, really feeling the feet touching the earth. It's earth element. You need earth element. It's just like those transformers that are on the electric wires and those huge areas where there's just the transformers. Basically, the system has to learn how to um, include the transformers and know how to do it. So the loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity, anything that will help you calm, connect and calm, concentrate. And then, of course, equanimity is the acceptance.
Yeah. And like I'm finding one of the things that helps me the most is when I say, this is just the way it is. This is it. you know? I mean, it's the way it is right now. So like just kind of, I don't know, that just kind of just ground or something with that.
It's so because it's the truth, and because this practice includes anything that can happen in the universe at any time. So the practice includes getting a relationship with this of kindness, right? Wisdom. It's learning how to get a relationship with this, and maybe not being able to do it perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Thank you. This is good. Yeah.
It's like getting like electric, it's like getting, electric current. And you're not fabricating it. That's always there around in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And the calm and the exhaustion are also aspects of being in this world.
Yeah.
As Jesse says, sometimes we start appreciating when there's dullness?
Yeah, I had a period of dullness after the retreat where, I don't know, it was too much or something was all like I was totally non-reactive for a while, and non-plugged in. And I think the thing that I'm just trying not to be worried about it. That's the overriding thing, like that I'm not going, something's not wrong with me,
Yeah, I mean, and I think that does tend to be like of course, an aspect of it, where it's like the intensity is so overwhelming, and I'd say that along with kind of what you mentioned in terms of just like behavior and having more sort of like potentially like kind of conflictual interactions with someone, just a reminder too that like there is this element sometimes where it's just it can feel we're overwhelmed and kind of consumed with like the internal dynamics of it all, and so that there's a place for, and in fact if you look at the kind of classical formulation of the spiritual life, it's like dana sila bhavana, right? So there's generosity, ethical conduct, and then meditation, mind cultivation. So the sense that this process can't be happening out of the context of the rest of the practice either, and that not only is that part of what kind of matures it, that it's also how it's like it provides a certain kind of sort of spiritual like metabolism to our kind of spiritual life, but it also is protective, so this sense of like remembering to just that if a lot of your day is very internal and just kind of keeps getting to the sort of uh, reminders of this sort of sensitivity that you're in right now, just the reminder that there's like, okay, what is the expression of your spiritual life in the world, right? And are you going outside, and are you connecting with nature, and are you kind of doing things for other people, or involved in the world in a way that's like that's not just sort of focused on kind of like how overwhelming it can feel internally, but expressing the goodness of your life, and then the sila part of that, of like the carefulness with, yes, when we're overwhelmed, when we're tired, when we're irritated, that we're going to tend to behave in ways that are more harmful, right? That will regret, that cause you know um, others to be harmed, physically, emotionally, whatever way it might be, and so that is also like a commitment. Now, again, we have to, like with all three of these, you have to be very careful about our kind of perfectionism and not having space for realizing that we are all in process with it, and not
Mhm.
just being hard on ourselves for times where we are imperfect in our behavior, right? Which of course are many, but there is also that remembrance of like, this is not just about kind of staying with this or sort of overwhelming internal experience, that these other aspects of the practice are things that not only are an important part of the practice on their own and spiritual development, but that they help us move some of the sort of like energetics, that Michelle was describing, and kind of get out of some of the places of it that can be more overwhelming. So I would say that aspect is also something to just look at, that like to be, intentionally engaged in the other aspects of like, oh, the doing of things, the doing of good, and the offering of that in your whatever scale, whether that's still inside your home or outside of your home, the carefulness, with one's actions. And then certainly just that sense of like, where are you expending physical energy in a way that is helping balance the kind of the energetics of what's happening in mind and body, because there is something for sure that's it's why on retreat we're doing sitting and walking meditation, right? Where there is an understanding that the kind of energetics of this really do require and are benefited by um, the the sort of considered integration of just like, yeah, physicality and movement, and never mind like actually being in nature or something like that as well. So just a reminder of those aspects as well.
No, that's great. That is something actually that I've been, well, the nature part is something that it's like absolutely essential. Like I live right beside a forest, so I try to, go out for walks about every day. And today it was out in the rain and it was in the garden. And yeah, that the whole aspect, like the sila and then the commitments, those are like really important. Yeah.
Great.
Right.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks.
both of you.
I just wanted humor. I'm just going to bring in some humor because I think that there are so many beings in nature, and some of them are very grounded, and some of them are flying. And the other night, I was like totally exhausted and dizzy, and it was late, and I went into the garage to just check on the mother cat, the other cats on the front porch, and there's this big toad. They're called bufos here. They're called big hand toad, but this big, huge bufo who had to have come in the garage and gone up the steps, and it's sitting there just about to jump into the cat's water dish. And if it gets in the water dish, it's filthy. It's just like filthy. And I had just filled it, like I was laid at the chores, and I'm looking at this toad and I'm like, no, like, no, no. And it's just like, of course, and the toad, if it could speak, would have said, of course I'm going to do it. In fact, I'm going to do it. And so I looked for something to stop it. I found this little cane, and I'm like, and I have this idea arrogantly as a human that I'm going to be able to get it to stop. So I put this thing in front of it, and I even think I can nudge it a little bit. I nudge it, and it's completely calm. It's completely unmovable. It's like has no interest in doing what I wanted to do. And of course, the cat's just looking at me like, you know, I can deal with this. Like, Michelle, I can deal with it. Like, go to bed. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, but there was something to me so funny about my inability to move this little teeny toad that it had such a Buddha-like stillness, right? And such
Mhm.
firmness and confidence in its right. And I find that stuff, even remembering that anytime is helpful. It's just helpful, the diversity within all of us and how we can really learn from each other.
Mhm. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it helps.
It's like that. Big Daddy Long Legs was in the washroom that I went into yesterday, and I was watching it creeping along the wall. Like totally, sometimes kind of following in. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, creatures are great. Great reminders. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jessica.
Hi, thank you. I don't know if this is a dissimilar question exactly. I think what I'm noticing a lot recently in my practice is.
Jessica, I'm just going to interrupt you for a quick second. Do you have like a fan on or something?
Oh,
No?
yep.
Okay.
Hold on. Sorry.
That's okay.
And I could probably. I see. Original.
It sounds much better right now.
There we
Yeah.
go. Let me do this too, I think. Yes, so sorry. I was gonna say what I'm noticing in my practice recently is um just kind of like the a big flux of like, really being able to sit and find some calm and contentment, and then but then at the same time, like, sort of these psychological structures of like I should be doing this or I should be doing that, or something should happen that's good because I did something good or something. I was just at a fundraiser, and then I took the bus there thinking like, isn't that good? I just drove my car, and then I could not get a bus home, and it's like 100 degrees, like walking over a mile home, and I'm just like, no. And then, trying to just be like, okay, this is what it feels like now to be this kind of frustrated and this kind of mad, and been wanting things to be so different than they are right now. And like, it's just really interesting to like really have up in my face the preferences of that and the real clenching around the resistance and like again, like, I think the shame brings all the striving of what I should and shouldn't do. And I can't just be here practicing, I have to go blah 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 or something like that. So I guess that's sort of the question of like, maybe how to is there sort of like a better way to practice when those things come up when like I said, this is what it feels like. I can do that part. And then like a story will arise like, oh, this is because you need to learn how to, when you're trusting something you shouldn't, or something like that. Or this is because, so yeah, I mean, I guess it's just it's day-to-day life stuff, I'm also trying to practice with it and be skillful, with what I'm doing with my practice, like sort of not using it to shut down those things, to sort of insulate myself from them, but like, to bring in some compassion to that kind of fire that can arise just like that when something doesn't work or when, I'm just like, oh, wow, look at that. So yeah, anyway, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, except for like, is there a way to be more skillful or more aim my investigation in some kind of like way that might sort of be more developmental or something like that, you know.
I can start. It's a great
Great.
question.
Yeah.
Oh, in some ways, like in a lot of our early practice, it can seem very challenging and difficult. But what's so surprising as you go along is that it's like resistance that's much harder to be mindful of than fear or anger, right? Like it's like, um, and it's to be able to remember that it's just unpleasant, right? Like that was like a trajectory that I clearly remember, certain things that happened where it was so painful that it hit me, like what you're saying, the story that would come up and it's really just the story is just trying to protect you from the pain. It's what we are conditioned to be like as humans. But I mean, some of you have heard this before, but it was such a huge moment for me where I was at a wedding in Honolulu, and the what is it that the flowers, the corsage was going to be thrown, right? And they called all the women over. It's like that traditional kind of wedding. And there were a lot of drunk people. And this woman in front of me um, had heels, like those real tall heels. And she went to jump for this, what is that called? Whatever.
I
It's
think you
like,
said it. It's Corsage. No.
Okay.
Bouquet. There we go.
she jumped and landed on the top of my foot, and it broke my foot, and which I assumed from the level of pain that happened, I assumed it was broken. But it was not the best time in my life for that to have happened anyway. And it was because it was so crowded, I couldn't back up out in time. And I, I went over to get a ride home as soon as possible. And the whole ride home, my thoughts were like you're describing, like, um, just why, but all those thoughts are why thoughts, like why? And I'm like, what exactly is happening? And I'm like, it really hurts, right? It just kept, all the thoughts were just to avoid feeling that pain. And I'm not saying that's bad or wrong. See, what's really important, and this where you are in your practice is so important, is to see if you can have this intention to understand that the thought patterns are a way to try to protect yourself. Like without that, we're merciless. Without that, the shame, the doubt, like all that mercilessness comes from having the should that we should be able to stop all that versus like that's the only thing we've got going for us when it's 100 degrees and we have to walk a mile and we're exhausted, right? Like what protects us? Well, all of this teaches us that we're replacing the old defense system, right, of greed, hatred, and delusion. We're replacing it with mindfulness and loving kindness, compassion, etc. We're replacing it, but we can't just go from 1 to 100. And particularly when things are very painful, physically or mentally, emotionally. What I love about this at this point in my life and practice is that this is where the this is where we cook. This is where we learn. This is like awesome. But it's so hard because it's so hard to be able to say it's simply really bad. It's really painful. Nothing about why, right? But the why, we keep trying to figure it out so that we can second guess the next bad, bad, unpleasant thing, right? It's all a
Or like if I figure it out, like I'll make my way through something, or something that won't happen again. I mean, right now there's such a constriction in my chest. It's sort of like there's an armor. Like, okay, I did that. Now we're just now we're just gonna like have this little shield right here for now. It's just, but yeah, I mean, it's just sort of that feeling of all that. It's just it's quite a teacher.
I always think of ET going, ow, like, and that's what we have to be able to learn to do, just that vulnerable, like, ow, and then usually compassion or can't,
Mm.
it's so hard. I think it's just, you wonder why this takes time. It's, no, it's right where you're at with it. Mm.
Yeah, so good. I don't know if I have a few things that I don't want to. I feel like what Michelle said is the most important, and most of it really is actually just sort of like adornment of that, which is like that you can't skip over what you're doing. You can't skip over watching your mind do what it does and wishing it wasn't, or wanting to find a better way, as you frame. And it's like there is no better. It's like you have to go through this, and yet it doesn't mean that. mm, and even from what you said, it's like, yes, there are moments where you just get it. It's just hot and it's uncomfortable and you don't like it. And then you go back to this thing, right? So a lot of what we're watching is there's moments where the attention can sort of drop into that, or like just sort of honesty. And then other times where you're going to have to watch it squirm, and and that it has its place too, right? Of course, in terms of all kinds of things, and that there are sometimes lessons to be learned. But unfortunately, it does. I mean, I love that those stories where it feels like we're getting punished for trying to do the right thing is like that's so good. And because there's
I
no equation.
I don't want to interrupt you too badly, but that's like I forgot to mention the main thought process was I have such bad karma. I have such bad karma. That's like the ultimate like put down of oneself. So go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah,
But that,
no, exactly. And then you can see this is happening because XY, right? That, like, to be very careful about believing that it's unfathomable, and we don't know. We do know that actions have consequences, and yet how that plays out, and there is something of it's different than saying this is happening because I need to learn X or Y. Like, I think that degree of uh like determinism isn't helpful, right? Or the kind of mechanistic sort of thing about karma, and and that it's one of those perfect places of where you're like, well, it's personal on one hand, of course, because it is our actions that are, but it's not personal in that way. Like there's this project that has been mapped out for you or something, right? So to be careful about that kind of those modes of thought. But there is a truth to this sense of like, well, when we are on the path and we are trying to do this type of practice, we are opening ourselves more, right, to the vulnerability of circumstance and the that we are asking, of life to be more sensitive to what's actually unfolding and the vulnerability, the lack of controllability of things, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this sense of like, you don't want to be so deterministic of like, this is happening so that I can learn this lesson. At the same time, you may indeed learn that lesson and it may have been helpful and this may have been an appropriate way to learn that. But to be careful a little bit about kind of the yeah, just that's sort of like how we think of the mechanism working. But it's like, yeah, well, here's a chance to learn something difficult, right? That we have to, or that's deepening for us, and it's often happens in places that are unpleasant, more than pleasant. Now we can have illuminating experience of pleasant qualities as well, for sure, but it's certainly not going to outweigh the hope that in enlightenment and increasing awakeness is going to constantly be a more and more pleasant experience is, of course, something we would long for, and is never proven to be the way it is. So that sense of yeah, just that some places, kind of a little like I was saying, Julie, right? That there are times where we can it it can be helpful to look for like, oh, is there any part of me that is like really excited to take this challenge up of something very unpleasant, something hopelessness or despondency, or sometimes very big things, not just physically hot, right, or exhausted, but what's happening in the emotional realm, and that there can be places where it, it's just to say, I think some of your train of thought is going in that direction already, which is to say, I can show up for this, and I want to be able to engage this in a meaningful way, and that just that impulse and that interest is very powerful and very beautiful. And then the mechanism, the details of like how we actually are able to do it and what feels like success or failure. I mean, it gets very muddled, of course, at times, but that it's you're seeing it, and you're seeing how complex these sort of types of things are. And of course there's going to be a sense of just thinking, well, maybe there's just a different way of doing it. But it feels to me, and it sounds like to Michelle, it's like you're doing it, you're doing it the right way.
Sometimes that just sucks, but yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And it's the acceptance of that, right? It's the acceptance of that is it goes against um, what we believe should be happening. That's why it's so liberating.
Thank you, Jessica.
I think, since no one else asking a question, so just, I think something that Jesse and I have been really emphasizing is that when things are really difficult and like you're on a roll like it does really help at times to change the channel to something, just as we say, go out in nature. It could be looking out the window with a cup of tea, but just stepping in the clutch, and we're in a realm as human beings with pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, but it doesn't mean we have to stay drowning in the unpleasant. Um, having the having the choice of skillful means to bring some balance is really important. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I mean, this example is something that's very high, fiery and hot and quick. But there are, of course, those like sort of prolonged, like painful, my health and my, things that are just, those long-term things that like are always kind of there. So it's kind of nice to have these moments of like the fiery hot thing, like, oh yeah, it's almost like it can resolve quickly, and you're sort of like, oh look, how nice is that? Yeah.
Yeah, you're bringing up something really important, which is there's like all those levels of long-term annoyance and then the levels of uh, more intense. Yeah, yeah.
And those aspects of identification, I mean, I think, like you're saying, the sort of short bursts, you see it in that, but that there is often, say with like a long-term health thing or just long-term patterns that we might see in ourselves of like, I am this person, or this is my kind of like essential, this is this sort of essential thing about me, and how hard it is to get perspective on those, so the idea that it is ultimately still the same process, but that the sort of shorter bursts and of course things that are less intense that we can observe are are also helpful, of that sense of it's like when you go to the basic instructions of Vipassana, where, for example, in our lineage, the way it is most often encouraged that you bring the attention to the abdomen and watch just the rising and falling that happens with the natural breathing, right? Not a manipulated breathing. And there's it's kind of based on an assumption that the breath is a basically more or less neutral experience for a lot of people. Of course, we know that it's not, and which is a big part of why we offer other anchors, in terms of like where to bring the attention. But the idea that you bring your attention to something more or less neutral and try to watch the change happening there, and how kind of utterly difficult that is, right? Like just how profoundly challenging it is to watch it at a place that's basically neutral or even slightly pleasant. Just the concentrate, just keeping the attention connected through change is hard. Never mind bearing the truth of the undependability and the constantly changing nature of it and everything, that all the flux of it, right? That it is so hard to do. And then but that's where we practice. That's the idea is that that's the primary method, is to practice somewhere basically neutral. It doesn't have to be the breath, right? It can be sound, it can be, somewhere else in the body. I mean, we try to offer different things. But this idea that with practice there, these other things happen. Painful sensations do arise. Pleasant sensations arise. And the only way we ever have a chance at being able to be with those things is because we have tried to build up the capacity in more neutral territory. And so, that sense of whether that's in terms of like kind of technically in terms of a primary object of attention or themes in our lives where, being able to be with something that's less evocative helps us be with something that's more evocative and, more triggering and more jarring. The metaphor still is the same, right? Or the approach is still the same. And yet there is this sense of like, yeah, we can learn in these places of extreme identification, extreme, emotional or physical experience. But the idea, in part of kind of what Michelle was saying, of like, and we're not necessarily trying to like
Hi.
abide there all the time and have that be like the primary place of our practice. So, just where are you reminding yourself to kind of, yeah, give yourself a break and practice in easier terrain as well, yeah.
And really, yeah, I'm really glad you said that, Jesse, because we have the time right now a little bit more we aren't even really talking about what the aversion to the pain, right? And the resistance, that's more painful than the pain, the initial pain often. And so that's it's often so invisible for us, like because the physical pain in this case is so intense that the resistance is slippery and we don't get to see it. But that what we're saying is that's the richness of this. It's it's so humbling. It's really humbling, and we can do it. It's just it's why it's called a noble path, because it's hard.
Because it's what?
So hard.
Oh,
And it's so important. It's so good, it's liberating. It's so good. Yeah.
the noble path of ice cream. Amanda, did you have a question? Let's see, it came up for a second, and then I noticed last week as well. Yeah, hi.
Hi. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Jesse. Um, I have a non-question question, and I'm also so often tired this time. Um, I feel the real generosity of everyone else who asks questions and my luck in being able to listen. Um, I am wondering if either of you, both of you, might be willing to speak to any aspect that feels like it arises related to suicide. Um, I seem to have uh, a higher than typical prevalence of humans in my life who walk with the specter of suicide. Um, One of the more prominent ones was one of my brothers, after decades of suicidality, succeeded in suiciding about a decade ago. And more recently, my former spouse, who's had multiple attempts and so forth, has informed me of his intentions. Um, and so it's been a long walk, and I don't necessarily have a specific question because it would be more like long, multiple conversations over the course of a life, right? Um, but I'm just interested if you have anything that comes to you as I just offer that forward.
Mhm. Thanks, Amanda. Important question.
Of course, yeah.
If you want to go first, I have a couple things that come always first in my head, but Jesse, do you want to?
If no, I mean whatever. If you want to, yeah.
Because it's such a in the human world, it's such a loaded question. But I remember, my mom basically totally did not want to live. So it's very like in my cells of having tried to understand it in my lifetime. And but when I first started doing retreats, I started to see that no matter what, the action is based on temporary moments of identification with aversion. That is it. And all the extra stuff that we put on it, in some ways, can be very and not really understanding that it's not a permanent mind state. It's like, I'm not saying that it isn't a deep identification, but it is just a temporary moments of identification with aversion. So that's one thing I would say that can really help everyone understand that that is all it is. That a behavior that can be so painful for everybody results in that is a whole other discussion, but to understand it technically as that is very important. And the aversion, of course, is aiming toward oneself. It could be aimed outside, but it's aimed inside. But again, that's a temporary identification. So I feel like when I started to understand that, it took a lot of the sting out of how things were for my mom. And I hope, of course, Jesse and I could talk about all this another way, but I'm going for this sort of I don't know, the bigger picture way. The other way is when Mahasi Sayadaw came to IMS in 79, one of the things he said that again helped me with this a lot was he said, full enlightenment is no more desire for existence and no more desire for non-existence. Like, isn't that like awesome? So, in terms of the rounds of rebirth, my sense is some people get really hit hard with the desire for non-existence. And some of us have the karma to be around that more than others. And it's hard teaching, but it has driven me to really try to understand on these more kind of bigger picture, profound levels. Because ultimately, the karma of it goes back lifetimes usually. And, you know, it's just like, my approach is always, you know, you do the best you can to take care of somebody and help them. But in my early life, I would drown. And so, like, it's learning how to care, not drown, and just like sometimes you have to live out the karma of it. That's what I would say. That's like what comes to mind initially. And I'm not saying it's not hard. It's probably one of the hardest. And then you can just, they don't disappear. They still have to deal, you know, it's like a karma. You have to help deal with the aversion, just aversion. And it's gonna have to be figured out next lifetime if it's not this lifetime. And that's the great equalizer. We all have our stuff we're working on this lifetime.
Yeah, I know we won't be able to like honor all of the permutations and aspects and truths of it, but I maybe just that from where Michelle kind of landed, that for all of the people in my life who either have suicided or contemplated it or wrestled with the dynamic and the patterning around it, it's always I feel very, I guess, fortunate to always have feel like I totally get it. Like I don't, there's no part of me that doesn't get how awful the mind can be and how hopeless and despairing and overwhelming, and the projection onto like the future of a kind of endless battle, an endless struggle, and no hope for resolution, um, that I really, it feels so understandable, some of the expressions of it that I've um, encountered, and it doesn't it's that aspect of it is not feels so important to like not judge and to not be confused by, because anybody who is involved in the practice of trying to just be in the body or be in the mind in the ways that we're trying to do, and follow the ups and downs of life, internally, externally, health, lack of health, whatever the comings and goings, and the fluctuation of gain and loss and pleasure and pain, status, disgrace, uh, it's like praise and blame, that of course we know how hard it is, and that's the good side of the practice, not just being like easier and easier and easier, that actually it's like, no, it's realer and realer, and that we really do seek to understand the profundity of all of these longings, and that, just like Michelle was saying, that Mahasi said and the Buddha describes, of like that the desire to not exist is also very powerful, incredibly powerful for many of us, and that there is this side of also, it's a mind moment of identification with that, and it's like, and if you've trained the attention to be able to watch these things, that it's like this, how different is it from the mind moment that is like, and wants the ice cream or whatever, right? Like something trite, and wanting to be, right, existing in a certain way, um, and then of course all of the layers, which it's like totally not right. I'm not to make this sort of equalization of all of the realms of human experience, except for part of what the practice does is this develops this capacity of like, and even last week, they're just the mind thinks a billion things every minute, right? Most of it is just ridiculous, and then we have a certain degree that we've sort of cohered around, like, well, this is my thoughts, this all fits into the realm of like me, and the things we like about me and the things we don't like about me, and then there's this sort of process of coherence around that, and of course that gets complicated, and has all kinds of impossible factors. So I think that part, it's important, for all of us to understand, and to not kind of moralize over. Um, and this isn't even dealing with the realm of like when you know, we have a but we're infirm in some way, physical disease that is, incredibly painful and has no cure. I mean, that's like a whole other realm, of course, of like understandability around things, and this sense of consequences of like, well, are we interested in this experience? Are we able to find interest in the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, kind of experience of the mind and of the body, and understand the consequences of actions that are um, identified, right, with aversion, or identified with craving, identified with ignorance, with not understanding it clearly. And certainly, that sense of karma, not as a kind of retribution thing, but also of like this sense of, we might want to put an end to a certain kind of pain, but there is an understanding in the system that there's no end. In that way, there's no ending it that way. It just keeps going, keeps moving. It might be in a different situation, it might be in a different context, right? But that this doesn't actually end that, and that there's something that we are charged with and need to unravel and heal and understand, that's important, and the total understanding that there are conditions in our lives that sometimes make that feel very impossible. And I think that we're always in that sort of reminder place in terms of people who are practitioners and people who are in this path of like that there's also this place, this even it's sometimes this slice of ability to be like, and there's the possibility, right, that change can happen, that the awakening and liberation of the mind is possible, and that's that, you know, finding a sort of connection and an ability to kind of like have that sense of possibility, and that anchoring in that is incredibly powerful, incredibly worthwhile. And then, of course, for folks who don't share that perspective or practice or kind of interest, it's very hard. You know, it's very hard. And that life is hard. You know, I mean, I think that there is the Buddha would not have denied that. You know, never mind then the sides of it, of course, as like someone who is a friend or a loved one. It's like the frustration with people who don't see the impact of their actions on others, right? All of us who care about them, all of us who will be really wounded in ways that are hard to heal from the feeling that they're, you know, we were excluded from what someone's sort of sense of priorities and emotional responsibilities and relational, you know, possibilities. And, you know, sometimes, of course, that often is, you know, part of the pathology of those moments and those experiences, and inability for one to see outside of themselves and to see their value or to see any value in their relationships that feel very bound to them, even if they don't feel bound back, you know. So it's a very confusing, powerful, mysterious, painful part of our lives, you know, and part of our families and relationships and, you know, social worlds, and you know, for, you know, most of us at some point, of course, in our own lives, right? And, you know, whether it's a chronic thing or just a sort of periods of crises where there's doubt in our capacity to go forward and move forward in a way that's, you know, building strength, building capacity. And so, you know, we all will have our challenges in mind and body, and the more we have sort of relationships and sangha and connections and, you know, people who we feel like we can trust to kind of give us perspective when we've lost it, you know, like we just, of course, we know how important that is, you know.
Jesse, I really am glad you said this toward the end, because it's, for me, with my mom, it's a lifetime of learning. Like it's not something that I'll keep learning from. So that, like, that's just to share that it was my mom, right, from the beginning. But like, I just wanted to offer that I have a friend that I don't often drive by his house anymore. but when he did suicide and I was driving by his house a lot, I would it wasn't like I let myself be angry. I was angry. I was angry. But I really, you know, just let that process, like driving by the house, like over the years, helped me to work with my relationship to what happened. And it wasn't like the anger, just, that's just what would happen, you know. And in my mind, it would be like, this, this isn't fair. You, you got to go, and you know, like you get to go, this isn't fair. That's always that place that I would hit. But then I just started that as part of the drive. Like, this is what would happen when I drove by. And eventually it would be like more compassion, loving kindness. But also when I would have those thoughts, compassion and loving kindness for myself. Mm-hmm. So that kind of repetition in one place over and over again was very healing.
And I guess what I want to say this in terms of like the Buddhist path, which is, there's a chant that we will offer sometimes, anicca vata sankara upadavaya damino upagitva nirujanti tesam upasamo sukho. And often it's translated as something to the effect of, all conditioned phenomena are arising and passing, having the nature to be born, they have the nature to pass away. Often the last phrase is translated as acceptance of this brings the greatest happiness, which is peace or something, right? Michelle will say that. The literal translation is the ending of this is happiness, right? So all phenomena are arising and passing. The ending of this is happiness. And what that's talking about is nibbana, which is to say that like when with the other translation, when there is acceptance of the coming and going, the arising and passing, the joy, the sorrow, when there is like total acceptance of those things, that these phenomena arise and pass on their own, the mind stops clinging to them, the mind stops needing things to be a certain way, stops rejecting them, stops getting entangled with them, and they do come to an end on their own. Because what the Buddha is teaching is that the reason they keep recurring is because we keep grasping for them. The reason we are reborn is because they're still grasping at that last moment of life, right? But that this is happening every moment, that we are asserting the future by clinging, and that when the mind is at that point of deep equanimity, that there is this experience of cessation, which is that things stop. Even consciousness stops. Nothing, there will be a moment of non-arising of anything. And then in this case, until we're fully enlightened, until that even a fully enlightened being then has to actually die before there's really stopping. But that this sense that, well, karma will still, there's still phenomena that will continue to kind of assert themselves because of past actions until sort of final moment. So it's to say that what we want is peace, right? That there is this deep desire to just have everything stop, the release and the relief of the stopping of the barrage. When I think it was Julie mentioned like the sense of like, and Jessica also, right? Just like the relentlessness, the sort of barrage of things. I mean, it's talked about sense impingement, right? That there is dukkha in just the relentlessness of experience. And yet, ending it out of aversion is not actually peace, right? So that is the teaching, that is the lesson, that through aversion or ending it out of craving or wanting something else, right? Or whatever it is, like the sense of that ends up just propagating it, promulgating it into the future. And that it is only through acceptance and peace and this capacity that we have where things will come to an end on their own. And there is no more coming to any state of being, right? Which is what the enlightenment is about. So this sense of like the shifting of, if we are more in that orientation, some people are more in a wanting orientation towards wanting pleasant experience. Some people are more oriented towards not wanting to exist. That either way, the sense of actually having to develop the faith and trust that there is a peace that's possible, but that it can't come out through aversion. That actually by acting out of aversion or greed or confusion, right, that we're actually going to end up kind of perpetuating it, is something that we do see and we do learn in our own practice. And it's such a powerful part of the value, to Vipassana, to the Buddhist teachings. And the sense of like the real peace of stopping is a legitimate, beautiful thing to long for, right? And yet part of where we get confused is the identification that Michelle was talking about, but also the means and the method, and what we end up cultivating in one approach or another, Because the Buddha would be accused of being nihilistic, right? That you're just wanting nothingness and empty, right? And so this sense of like you have to, it is a subtle, these are subtle terrains of distinction that are important. And when it comes to a question like that, Amanda, it's like it's really important and very powerful to actually start to look at where the subtle sort of differences are, and how powerful actually a a little subtle difference is because it really is the difference between heaven and hell, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did
Thank
we
you
address,
for asking.
yeah, did we address enough of this for now?
It was perfect. I more wanted to offer it as an open space, you know? I think like you seem to refer, or I had the sense that you were suggesting, Michelle, with your own, it's just, it's, it shows up in my life, you know? It seems to be, and so, you know, to have any conversation would be many, 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 many conversations. So I didn't have a particular need tonight. It was more, um, you know, there's this not new, but fresh presentation of it in a way again in my life. And so it felt like when there was a pause in questions, okay, it's about my turn to raise my hand since so many people are so generous all the time. So thank you both for giving your offering in response. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Mm. Thanks, everybody. Yay. So good. Yeah. Take care.
You
Stay
next.
cool. Hydrated. See you next week.